TCS Live Hockey's premier coaching conference is returning to Canada August 6th to 8th in Edmonton, Alberta. Hosted in partnership with Hockey Canada's Foundation and presented by Hudl, this year's event will take place in the Ice District, home of the Edmonton Oilers, and alongside the Hlinka Gretzky U18 World Championships. Last year at the University of Michigan, over 500 coaches representing 14 countries and all levels of the game attended the event. If you're a coach, this is the highlight of the offseason. Go to thecoachesitelive.com for more information. And big news, we've just announced the first round of presenters who will be joining us in Edmonton this summer. Andrew Lord, head coach of the Ontario Reign; Daniel Bachner, player development coach with the Carolina Hurricanes; Daniel Fujita, skating coach with the Calgary Flames; Brendan Sawney, assistant coach with the Coachella Valley Firebirds; Riley Dudar, Hockey Canada skills coach and director of player development with WHL's Brandon Wheat-Kings; and Job Franson, the founder of Skill Acquisition and one of the world's foremost experts in how coaches can leverage the science of skill acquisition and practice design to enhance their team's performance. Early bird tickets are now on sale. Again, go to thecoachesitelive.com. You're even going to be able to take in a live recording of the Glassnote podcast with a very special and surprise guest. I hope to see you there. So Matt, I thought we could start here. How has being a fan of the New York Jets prepared you for the ebbs and flows of operating a global tech company?
Oh my gosh. Hey, look, in New York Jets, that's not where I thought we were going to start. I have a lot of respect for the organization and people who've been in the organization since Hudl installed there. But I think if your bar as an NFL fan is being a Jets fan, you gotta push yourself to be ready for anything that comes at you. But when you're running a company, you're like, hey, look, if my NFL team's going to be this, I gotta pick it up somewhere else in my life. So it made me push a little harder as being where we are at Hudl.
Well, your staff has certainly described you as mentally tough. So I think that's part of that is where that comes from. When we think of tech companies, Lincoln, Nebraska is not necessarily the origin that we would consider. Can you maybe take us through kind of the early days of Hudl and how the company got started?
Yeah. So we started with the University of Nebraska's football team, and David Graff is our CEO, worked with the team. You got to reset your brain back, over 20 years ago at this point, 2005. In Nebraska, they were making hundreds of DVDs a day for their football team. And that's the best way teams would take video out of a facility, right? They had all this great data and video in-house, but as soon as the players wanted to go home at night, or the coaches even wanted to go home, DVDs were really the easiest way for them to do that. And we came in and we were really fortunate. Brian Kaiser, our CTO, was like, hey, look, we can take this stuff and digitize it and move it to the web and move them away from what's really a clunky experience around using DVDs. You think about trying to find a specific frame. I don't know the last time you watched a DVD. It's been a long time for me, but getting that very specific frame of video you wanted to watch to maybe see footwork or hand placement, or even just like how somebody moved on or off the ball is really challenging. Moving that to digital made things a lot easier, and so we went to Nebraska and said, like, look, there's a way for us to move you away from DVDs and give you so much more value around your video and data. Let's make this easier. Let's make it easier to get value out of it, to have all that information together. Let's make it easier for you to communicate. And so we built a solution that just helped them get their video online and communicate around it. And that's really the genesis of Hudl. How do we make things easier for teams to use video and data? And we're really fortunate that we've had some smart people on the way to help us, attack and grow from there. But that's how we got our start.
And were all the founders at that time? Was it literally kind of University of Nebraska raised in the sense that everybody went to school there, and that's very much where it's rooted?
Yeah, we all actually, the three founders and me and a couple other guys, we all lived together. We were in a duplex.
No way.
So it was fun. We had two sides of 8 bedrooms on either side of a duplex, and so we all were in classes together. And obviously we're doing other things, but David was working with the university. I was building IT on campus. Everyone was we were all around here. And when you live in Lincoln, it's hard not to be a Nebraska football fan. So we were, we were really fortunate to get our start here and for them to give us a chance, right? And to sign off and say, like, yeah, we'll be your pilot partner and help build with you. And then give us a jump start, really to the Jets. Ironically, after the question you asked, the Jets were the second team. And so when we signed the Jets as team number 2, and then built out from there into high school. It was, but it really started with Nebraska as our roots.
It's interesting just the conversations we have on this show. It's predominantly like hockey coaches, and
Yeah.
and so let's say you talk to an NHL coach, they get their start somewhere, and at that moment, like it's not obvious to them that they're going to be an NHL coach someday. They're just trying to be a great GA or assistant coach with their local community program. Back in those early days, when was the moment that it was obvious to you that, hey, like this opportunity is really significant. Like this is a lot bigger than Nebraska football.
Yeah, it wasn't those early days. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I think, we were just, I always joke, you said a lot nicer about coaches. Like we were just young, dumb kids, maybe in a way, right? Like, hey, this pro and this college market, Division I college, this is huge and it's going to be great. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll expand this into basketball and hockey and baseball, and maybe we'll think about going to pro soccer across the pond. And instead, what I'll tell you, there's probably two key moments for me that made me realize how big this was. In 2008, we were really banging our head against the wall, and we were trying to get more pro teams to jump on board. Right, we had or elite teams. We had Nebraska and we had the Jets, and it was really hard to get that third team to come across. And meanwhile, we had all these high schools telling us they had the same problem. Right, I'm making DVDs for my athletes, but instead of being a full-time job, I get 10 hours with them a week, and we got to be on the practice field. We can't be in the classroom, messing with the DVD. Like, are there easy ways? You have this tool, and we're like, yeah, we're a pro tool, guys. Like, we're not a high school tool. And I remember coming back from a convention where we were meeting pro guys, but I had a stack like this tall of high school leads, and I think it was like this collective realization from all of us. It was like, what if we just went after high schools? Like, let's go see if high school football teams want this. And we went so fast. We would all go out to trade shows or coaching conventions, and we'd all come back and we'd be like, hey, we just signed up 10 more teams. Like, it was just like, we went from 0 to 350 high school teams in a year. The next year we went from 350 to 2,200. And you could see this like acceleration. We're like, okay, hey, this is really big. And I said, there's 2 points. The other point to me was when we really started having teams around the world in multiple sports coming to us, probably later about 13 and 14. And in 2014, when we really started to expand in Europe, and we knew the sales process we had built in place, we knew that the customer service expectations we had in place and the product experience we had in place, they were all resonating for multiple sports in the US. When we saw it start to grow outside the US, we're like, hey, there's something here. And we started, going through our customer logs. And it's like, wow, we have people in, I think, 10 or 12 different countries already buying Hudl without us having any reps there. So we knew there's a real opportunity globally at that point. And so it was exciting moments for us for sure.
No kidding. And it's interesting. So when we started working with Hudl, the stat was shared with me that at that moment that 99% of all high school football games in the US were uploaded to Hudl on Friday night, which is just you talk about market share, just an incredible statistic. So I repeat that as we've sort of, introduced Hudl into our hockey community. Like, that seems to be the stat that maybe has resonated or built the most trust. We're like, well, if that's happening, I'd be foolish not to learn more. But at what point did it transition from taking, film from DVDs to the cloud to, hey, from a teaching perspective, we can really empower coaches to be, not just better teachers, but more efficient teachers by solving a bit of the time crunch problem?
Yeah, I would say a lot of that came through in probably the like 2010 window, right? Like the early stage was like, let's get your video online and help you make playlists and just kind of do your workflows there. In 2010, our CTO, Brian, I remember sitting with him, and we go out to these conventions and we'd see people present to coaches, right? And this is really universal across every sport, right? They get up in front of a group, they've got slides, they maybe have some videos, and it was always really clunky to get that all pulled together. And Brian's like, well, we can just build a presentation tool, and this will change the way that teams teach. And in fact, our early presentation tools were all web-based. They would bring all the video and your slides from whatever you had or your images you would upload together. Teams could embed that on other websites. They could take it to clinics or conventions and present. And it was, I think the two, you see these flywheels that happen at Hudl around sharing video. It's why you end up with most game film or 99% of teams using us. is because it made it easy to exchange and trade video. And that,
Or yeah, especially in football, I guess that's just obvious, right?
exactly. And now you're hearing it in other sports like hockey and soccer, as we've been talking about. But that teaching tool is one of the next ones where we saw a team say like, wait, I'm trying to use an overhead projector, or I'm trying to use, slides here and then switch to video. And it's just like, it's really, I don't have a lot of time. This is so much more efficient, and I can share these ideas with other people. And this presentation tool that we brought on in probably 2010, maybe 2011, like that really changed the way a lot of coaches presented, especially the high school level, the youth level. And it was just an eye-opening moment for us where, gosh, there's just so much we can do to help improve the game and take these individual workflows and just constantly make them better and more efficient and help them, maximize the performance of their athletes. And if you kind of keep that as your North Star, you start to find a lot of opportunities to grow.
I read that, I believe it was around 2013, you guys received a bit of press and that you were labeled, I guess, one of the top 150 fastest growing companies in the United States. And it's, what's interesting is like, we talk with, college coaches, for example, and they spend so much time trying to fill out a roster. They need to get 5 more players to round out their roster, and the time and care and the interview process for those 5 players to ensure that they maintain their culture. It's imperative. It really is, because eventually it becomes their culture. But when you're in that stage, and we're talking, I'm assuming like adding hundreds of people into your organization, how did you think about, how you're going to maintain that culture? And I was reading this and I'm sort of doing the math. I'm like, man, you guys are still young kids yourself here. It's not like you would have had like a lot of corporate experience to lean on to navigate that process.
Yeah. First of all, we've just been really fortunate to have amazing advisors kind of coach us along the way. Our first chair of our board, Jim McClurg, was a regent in Nebraska, and an amazing influence on us, would just be here and present for us really anytime we needed. And often, even when we weren't sure, he would just show up in our office and give us this incredible advice. But chair of our board now is Jeff Rakes, who's a guy who was at Microsoft Business and helped really build Microsoft to what it is today. One of the largest public companies out of Nebraska is a company called Nelnet. They're just up the street from us. The chairman of their board has been a longtime advisor for us, a guy named Mike Dunlap. And I could go on and on. Like, we've just been so fortunate to have these people who wrap their arms around us. And then, frankly, the Lincoln and Nebraska business community have been great to us too. Clay Smith, who's an advisor for us, Jeff Nordick, who's a CEO of Nelnet. Like, these people just, if we ever needed anything, they would just be like, they'd almost drop everything and just be like, yeah, sure. What can we help you with? How can we help you? And so we got the real benefit of being able to ask these people, like, okay, you've taken companies to this size and scale. What are the things that you wish you would have done when you were a lot smaller, or that you can give us advice on now? And maybe to your first question here, it's like, we are ruthless on culture. And I think that's something we've learned from sports, right? It's, you got to have everyone bought in. Everyone's rowing the same direction. Everyone is understanding what their role is and how to work. It doesn't mean we don't have conflicts, but we are constantly pushing for people who are, have that mindset of like, hey, if we're going to go win, we're going to attack a market. We're going to be the best. Like, we are going to go play to win, and we're going to do this the right way. We're going to win together with, our teammates here, with our partners here. And look, you've talked to a lot of people at Hudl, and I hope you feel this, right? Is that, that there's not this mindset of like, hey, I can't wait to promote myself versus this other person, or hey, if I get this sale, I get to step on this other person to get to the next level. It's like, hey, we're all trying to win together, but that's not just with us internally, it is externally too, right? We got to do this with our partners and with our customers. And if we all grow together, that's how you really do something in the right way. And when somebody doesn't buy into that, or when somebody kind of pushes the wrong way, we try to find an easy way to exit them out and transition them on to the next piece of that. That can be really challenging, for a sales rep. If you have a great sales rep who's a jerk, and they hit the numbers, but you kind of got to look at them and be like, hey, you're not representing us right in the market, so we got to think about this the right way. Or you can have really talented product people that build really great stuff, but if they're not the right culture fit, it can actually destroy the whole thing. And so, we've made this commitment to our team. We've made this commitment to ourselves, like, be very intentional about what kind of company we want to build and how we want to think about this thing. And is this a place that you're excited to come work at every day, right? Like, when the alarm goes off in the morning, I jump out of bed excited because the problems we get to tackle and the people I get to tackle them with. And like, that is who I want to have on our team. And when you build a culture with that kind of intentionality every step along the way, and then you share that to your people, the hope is that we just keep hiring better and smarter people than me. And so far we've been pretty good at it, keep hiring these people that are better at whatever job they're doing than me and smarter than me. And it makes my job really easy. I get to focus on, hyping them up and, attacking the next thing.
Well, so many parallels to team sports, right? But I think the one thing that we talk a lot about at the coaches side, and that we've really stolen from you, and we do our big conference, TCS Live. It's presented by Hudl, and we're super proud of that. And but when we jump on calls with your staff, and I mean, obviously, we want to be good partners. So we'll say, like, how did it go from a sales perspective? We're like, do you mean numbers? And it's like, it's never about the numbers. The word that keeps coming up again and again from your staff, it's like, hey, we're here to build relationships. We're just here to meet people. We want to make sure we're more concerned about making sure everybody has a good time. And we believe that if we can do that, if we can create great experiences for folks, that, naturally the people that can benefit from our service, like, that'll just happen organically, but we don't want to force anybody. So that's been, I think, a real, a teachable moment for us that we've really tried to integrate into what we do. But, I sense you guys are, and I don't know if this was maybe something you guys considered early on, but you are dealing with alphas, like people that are highly competitive, that, they're paying their mortgage on every wins and loss. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got the blueprint and the secret on all of them. When you first started having those conversations with coaches and programs, like, how did you instill that level of trust that, hey, like, we're working with you, and we want to see you win, but we also respect that, what's contained inside that footage and that video, that's really personal to how you go about having success in your day-to-day gig.
Yeah, it was that you nailed it. That was one of the biggest challenges we actually had early on. Was, you're going to talk to coaches and you're like, hey, we're going to put your video on the internet. And they're like,
yeah, totally.
That seems like really unsafe.
It might as well have been getting like a blimp and flying like their playbook in the sky, right?
Right. And, part of that was like, I try to hit things from two sides with people. I always start with the business side if I can, of like, guys, if we go out here and we share your playbook, or we share the secret sauce of how you practice and what you're going to do, how long do you think we'll be in business? Right? Like, let's just stop for a second. Like, that would be one of the single-handedly dumbest business decisions I could make as somebody trying to grow something. So let's stop there. And then second, we lean into, what's the integrity look like here? Like, me as a person. Like, I will do everything to make sure you're successful, but I'm also trying to grow this company, but I'm not willing to cross the line here. I'm not willing to cheat and give out, go into other customers' information and bring it and give it to you. I'm not willing to cross the line on these kind of things. And that comes down to culture and integrity of who I am. And a lot of that, to your point, I think earlier, is like, it's about relationships. Like, you've got to trust me a little bit, because you are giving me this sensitive information about your team and how you're game planning and what your thought process is going to look like. Whether it's what shifts are you running or how you're going to attack certain defenses, those kind of things matter a lot. And, I can tell you the business reason why it doesn't make sense for me to share it, but I also need you to trust who I am. And I think building those relationships and getting people to trust you, that's a key part of it, along that journey.
What's been your own personal leadership journey? And I look at your background. I mean, you started at computer science in Nebraska. You do your MBA, but again, I mean, from there, it would appear that you jump, right in the deep end. Like, as you've kind of gone about that, who have perhaps been some of the mentors and maybe some of the challenges that you've faced as you've elevated to this role?
Yeah, I think, I've listed a handful of them, Mike Dunlap, Jeff Frakes, Jim McClurg. They've all given me this amazing advice at multiple stages in my career. I've been really fortunate to meet with a lot of coaches and spend time with, coaches at different levels. There's Nate Lenser, who's a basketball coach here in Nebraska. And one of the things I really commit myself to is anytime I get time with a professional coach or even a high school coach, I just want to like pull one nugget out of them. Like, how do they think about things and talk about things? And what is this something that I can pull out that they communicate? And, what did I miss and go from? Because there've been, legendary coaches that we've gotten to engage with over time. I'll give you a funny story in a second, but about getting to Texas, but that they've just given us real wisdom. There's a guy, the story, when we signed a partnership with the Texas High School Coach Association. It's an amazing association in Texas. around sports. And we show up, and one of the guys in the partnership is a guy named D.W. Rutledge, and he was a coach at Judson High School. And I spent time growing up in San Antonio, and my grandparents had season tickets to Judson High School, and the guy was the head football coach and knew my aunt.
They had season tickets to high school football?
Yeah, it was like, and
oh my God, we're coming from Canada. That's just like, that's so cool. That's so cool.
But my aunt was a cheerleader, and he knew my aunt, and to show up, and I'm just like, you coached high school football for forever, and like incredible athletes and incredible teams, like, just like pick their brain, like what are things you can pull from them. And I think that is, if you go into every interaction and say like, gosh, what can you teach me? Like I can learn from everyone, especially coaches. They just have so much that they can teach you as you go through this journey of, how did you motivate players or your team when things weren't going the way you wanted them to, or how did you motivate people to be better when they were at the top, right? How can you, when you're winning every day, it's different, right? Like how do you gotta push yourself for that next edge? And so I've been really fortunate to spend a lot of time with different coaches around the world, and then, like I said, business leaders. From a journey perspective, I'll say this: I've come a long way. I wasn't a great leader early on. Maybe sometimes I thought I was, but I think you just have to learn how to connect with people the right way. I spent a lot of time with a personal emotional connection with my team, try to figure out what motivates them, what gets them out of bed in the morning. Everybody's different. For some people, it's recognition. For some people, it's prestige. For some people, it's a new problem that they want to get into. And so trying to help find what is that thing that motivates everybody, and then building with them, really kind of not just by myself saying like, hey, well, I think this will get them there. Like, how do we unlock that next level here and really play cards face up? I tell this to my team all the time. Like, I'm going to tell you, here's how I think about things. Like these challenges, I want you to play cards face up with me, and let's figure out how we build together to something great. That is a skill set that I've had to, I'm not perfect at it today, but it's something that I've really evolved over time. It used to be a lot of like, I think you'll be this way, but I'm going to write that in my notes over here and then try to like guide you that way. And I've really tried to play a lot more cards face up, where I talk to people about, here's where I see you, here's where we can go. How does this align with what you think? And let's build together. I think that's been maybe one of the biggest evolutions in my journey.
Well, you know what? It's interesting. So again, we had, the benefit for the sake of this conversation to reach out to some of your staff and teammates and just said, what is it about, not just Matt, but just sort of the overall leadership at Hudl. And it was interesting. They all kind of pointed towards time. And what I mean by that, they said, goes out saying Matt's a busy guy, but they're like, if you ask him for 5 minutes, he'll give you 10. If he runs into you in a social environment, he remembers the name of your kids, your family. He remembers the last conversation you had. Some went as far to send in pictures, various events that they had with you. But, I think that one thing that we all deal with in our day-to-day lives is that, we're all busy, right? Time is the ultimate currency. So when you talk about getting out of bed and you're excited to tackle the day, how do you design for intentionality to make sure that you have the time to have those touch points that ultimately are going to create a lot of equity in your personal relationships, but also with the organization?
Well, first of all, those are way too nice of compliments for my team. I appreciate all that stuff. I wasn't. Yeah. I think. I joke, I borrowed a phrase somebody gave me along the way, and it was, if you don't schedule your day, someone else will schedule it for you. And I thought this was like an aha moment for me, because I was definitely I've got a couple blocks, I'll be fine, I can do all this stuff. And what I found is I was missing out on a lot of things. I was missing out on those intentional touch points with our team, but also at home, right? I was missing out on, hey, I was 5 minutes late to my, daughter's soccer game, or I was, 10 minutes late to my son's football game, or dinner with my wife at home. And I said I'd be home at this time, and I was just a little late because I kind of let things nudge around. And so what I've tried to be better at, really, especially since COVID, this was a aha moment for me there, was really building in the hey, here is where the structure of my day is. And more than just, hey, these are the 3 meetings I have. Like, what is the tent poles that I want to hit? When are times that I just want to walk around and go talk to the team? When are times that I can spend time, just knocking out a couple emails, right? And it's not that I have every 15-minute schedule on my calendar. I don't. But I really try to look at my day every morning when I wake up, or the night before I go to bed, and say okay, what are the windows in which I can do this? When can I go talk to our hockey team, which sits, just, where I'm at in headquarters, just around the corner from me. So I just want to go talk to them, like learn what challenges are they running into? What are the customers saying? Like, where are we doing well? Where can we improve? And I spent a lot of time on that. And then I'll tell you, I cheat. I borrowed this from some other people. I've started to borrow this from one of our good friends, who's a head football coach. I just start to write everything down now in notes in my notes app on my phone.
Like old school. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, I've got this. Like, here's a person. Here's the kids' names. Here's their birthdays. Like any piece of information you give me, I start to just write it down. And it's not because I want to be creepy, but it's because I know that, like, hey, I'm going to be at this event with people. Like, let me hit this. I know we've talked about it before, but it just gives me a chance to jumpstart that. But again, it's like being intentional about those personal, emotional connection points. That can be so valuable when you're trying to build a team. And I think it's a huge thing that any of us can learn and be better at every day. And so if people have suggestions on that stuff, I'm always open and I'm finding ways to be better, because I'm not perfect yet. I want to keep getting better.
Well, you know what? I think that one of the kind of universal challenges that at least the coaches we talk to face across all sports is that, when you're building your team, you want to make sure that the players have the prerequisite skill set to help you out on the court, the field, the rink. But you want to make sure you have that right character. And, as I alluded to, I think, one thing you guys have done really well is you built a team that kind of brings energy to every interaction. And I can imagine that can be really challenging. And ultimately, you probably, just like every other coach, you want to make sure that your players are going to have the same values, make good decisions, et cetera, when you're not in the room with them. I'd be curious, because so many of your coaches leverage Hudl for recruiting. When you're building your team, what are maybe some of the questions that you ask to evaluate if somebody's going to have the character and the characteristics to fit into the Hudl team?
Yeah, I wish it was as easy as, like, are you a high character person?
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I ask simple things. I don't think I've ever cracked some sort of secret code, or anyone at Hudl, right? But sometimes it's like, ask, like, hey, tell me about a disagreement you had with your team recently, right? Or give me a challenge you went through, and, like, walk me through your emotions. Like, how did you go through this? Because I think that can be really telling, right? And not just like, how did you handle it and the result you got to, because of course they're going to tell you something great, but it's like, walk me through your journey. And you can learn a lot from how somebody, responds to adversity that they run into, or a conflict that they've run into, and just like how they tell you that story. And so you can, some of that is just a feel, like, are they lying to you or not? But I think you just got to ask them that kind of stuff, right? What are the things that get you out of bed in the morning? What are the things that motivate you? And you can tell when somebody's real, and you can tell when somebody's blowing smoke, right? And so I think that's some of it. And then sometimes I just ask people, I'm not in as many frontline interviews as I used to, but I would ask people silly questions, Aaron. Like, I would say things like, we'd tell this whole wild story, and I for the sake of time, I won't tell it to you, but it would, after like a 5-minute intro about us being in New York City, and David and I, and like, trying to get tacos, I eventually land on this question of, like, how many quarters does it take to stack to the top of the Empire State Building? And so, like, I've just, like, riffed a story at somebody, and we're just, like, laughing and seeing how but I just want to see how they respond to a question like that. And you can watch how people process challenges live, right? So I want to understand, like, you've now told me how you do this. Now I want to see, I've just, like, thrown a wild question at you. Like, how do you dig in underneath? Like, what's your response to that? Like, some people handle it like, oh, okay, hey, thanks for wasting my time with this story. And, like, no, you're just asking this question, but, like, they'll spar with you and get through it. Some people freak out, right? And you see their brain, just like, I don't know, like 25 million. It's like, okay, well, like, how did you get there? Like, let's go. And I think seeing how people respond under pressure, that's the real deal. It's one thing you said earlier, right? And this for anybody listening too, coaches, they're alphas, right? Like, people want to win. So you're going to get, like, direct, hot, like, spots, like shots fired at you. Like, what about this? Or, like, why should I pick you versus somebody else? Or, hey, this didn't go the way I wanted it to. Like, what can you tell me about this? What are you going to do to make this right? Like, people necessarily aren't even intending to be hostile. They're just direct. And you've got to be able to handle that kind of pressure when you're dealing with coaches, because not everyone is going to come to you and be all lovey-dovey, right? Like, they're going to come at you in the middle of the season when something didn't work right at 2 a.m. and they're frustrated. And you've got to be able to handle that with the right response. And I think that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. If you you can find the right culture, the way people talk and the way things go through, but sometimes you just like give them those one-off spark questions and it helps quite a bit.
Love that. Love that. I would argue, we kind of have this 30,000 foot view of hockey at the professional level, but, right down to the grassroots level. And I would argue that, few things have had the bigger or have had a bigger impact on the game than InStat. And, I think part of the reason was that it was obvious for a long time in football, for example, that you film all the games. In fact, you film practices. But when we started introducing Hudl into the hockey market, like the one little gap was that not everybody filmed or had cameras turned on in the action. But then InStat was inserted, and it was just an absolute game changer. How has, since that acquisition, how have you continued to integrate InStat, its capabilities with, the core Hudl product?
Yeah, it's a great question. We loved InStat. I mean, InStat, when we made the acquisition of InStat and bringing it into Hudl, hockey was really hockey, basketball, but hockey was forefront in my mind. Like, I think there just wasn't another solution really meeting that need in hockey. And so we saw a real opportunity to say, like, hey, we've seen all these other workflows work in other sports. Hockey has an opportunity here. We can build from InStat. And so being able to give that deep level of data across a wide breadth of video and continue to find ways to bring that together, that's really important. What we want, what you start to see really over the course of this next year is, the simplicity of pushing content back and forth and making things more accessible for athletes. I think one of the things that we see, in other sports that people really like is like, hey, I can go use the InStat type platform, filter down to the content I want, and then kick it over to Hudl where my athletes live, right? Because if you live and breathe in InStat as a coach or an analyst, maybe it's great. But for athletes, they just see their team report. And getting into it can actually be sometimes a bit overkill for an athlete. But being able to say, like, hey, here's the 5 clips I want you to watch on our upcoming opponent, like, in bringing those pieces together and really bringing that unified video and data experience across, where it doesn't necessarily feel like you're in 2 platforms, but you kind of say, like, hey, this is my content library where everything lives and exists. And here's my Hudl library where I maybe consume and do all my game planning for my opponents or my individual scout or coaching for my players. That's great. And then we want that content and video to flow together more seamlessly. So as content flows into Hudl, the goal is to expand the InStat platform, or really that hockey library, to really serve every level from grassroots to elite, right? So that you can go through and watch. Imagine being able to say, like, hey, this is a kid I'm interested in adding to my team. He's 16 and he's just moved here, but I can actually watch clips from them at 8 years old and at 10 years old and all of last film, and be able to see their progression and how they've changed. That can matter a lot. And that's the stuff we see in every sport, right? Is how can you help tell your story the right way, or as an analyst, evaluate whether, you're down to the last 2 spots on your team, which 2 do you want to add? And having a wider breadth of video can be really powerful. So we're excited to continue to expand our hockey solutions, continue to bring more analytics, continue to bring in, other pieces of our platform around athlete performance, and start to layer all these things together to help coaches make better decisions in terms of game planning and in terms of roster building, and help athletes have better access to content to reach their full potential.
Well, you know what? It's so timely, right? Because, last year, hockey is unique in that as a young player, you need to decide, are you going to go play major junior hockey and jump straight to the pros, or are you going to go play, was generally described as, tier 2 or junior A hockey, and I'm going to go to the NCAA and try and make the jump from there. So, again, unique to the sport that you're asking, kids effectively to make really big decisions that are going to affect the rest of their career. And so now that's gone. So now, kids can go play major junior hockey and go to the NCAA. Last year we see Gavin McKenna go from the Medicine Hat Tigers to Penn State, for example. But what I found is really interesting with this is that, when we talk to coaches that, let's say we're, Northern Michigan wins a national championship, back in the early 90s, or some of these small schools, like, it was effectively like they sort of had their niche in the country. Like, they might say, I'm going to get most of my players from Northern Alberta because I've got some relationships up there. And that was sort of the competitive edge, that you could pick up the phone and just trust that somebody was going to say, Matt said this kid can score goals. I'm going to believe him. But now the advantage is, man, you can really have a global reach in the players that you're identifying. And now we've just expanded that where, I remember last year it was like talking to NCAA schools, and they're like, what are you doing? They're like, I'm watching like every CHL game imaginable. But they're leveraging those tools. Can you maybe shed some light just on, not just in hockey, but in all sports, like how you've seen the recruiting landscape change, specifically how it's affected teams, but also the ability for aspiring players to showcase themselves to coaches.
Yeah, it's there's so much there, and I think the reality is the way global recruitment has changed is basically arguably the same across every sport. There might be at different stages of that journey, but it is everything you articulated is right there. You could just plug and play different leagues and sports in there, but to hit it from an athlete perspective, the stories we love are the stories of, hey, I wasn't in, the recruiting hotbed, and my parents couldn't afford to send me to the right camp, or I played hockey in my local community, but I couldn't travel, right? And I just couldn't afford it. And now with video, I can get exposure to coaches who would have never seen me before, and maybe they will come see me one time, or maybe I'll get an offer to get to the next level, which then helps me on my journey. And I think we see that really in every sport, right? It's whether it's back to our early stages of American football, we saw this with an athlete who couldn't travel around, had 0 D1 offers, ended up getting a offer to go play at Oregon after he had like 28 offers because of his Hudl highlight, which was him blowing people up on kickoffs, right? And it was just like, you have that, and now you see the same thing in basketball. You see the same thing in global football, where and soccer, where we're filming tournaments in Africa and put it into our version of InStat for soccer, which is called Y Scout. And in the Y Scout platform, our first tournament we went and filmed in Africa, we had 4 kids get multi-million-dollar contracts into Europe.
Wild, really.
Huge amounts of money. And these teams tell us, like, we would love to go see this stuff, but we can't time, go all the way back. Time is a real challenge.
Sure, yeah.
We can only be so many places, and our budget limits us. But if we have video, and then we can use video plus data to say, like, hey, here's 50 kids we should watch. And these 50 kids we can watch. Now let's filter this down to, hey, we've watched them. Now these are the 22 we're interested in. Now we can actually go travel and see 22 kids, right? And I think when you think about what video is doing from that exposure perspective and changing recruitment, it used to be, to your point, I need 5 kids on my roster. I call a couple guys that I know, they're going to give me 3, and I can go scout around and find 2, and maybe I'll get lucky. And now it is, I know I need 5 on my roster. Let's start with the pool of all athletes, filter down to the kind of play style I'm looking for, who's got an expected goal rate at a certain level, or who's plays at a certain pace. Let's bring that information together, filter this down to a list, and then, go from there. Maybe one of those kids is around the corner from my house, or maybe they're all the way, in California, and I'm going to go recruit them from California, and that's fine. I think that's just what you're seeing really globally is this expansion of access to content, access to video is just expanding opportunities for athletes to give them, the opportunity they deserve that maybe they would have missed out on before.
No, it's really amazing, and I think really changing the landscape in a positive way. And I love what you touch on. And I mean, we see that in hockey where, so much of the spotlight is shone on kids that maybe have means, and that what Hudl has done is provided every kid that whether you're in a big city or a small town, if you have the ability, you can get noticed. I think we're all inundated right now, AI.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you. You probably have, maybe a broader purview, but we're trying to figure out, like, there's 100 different directions you go, and you're trying to figure out, like, maybe I can just pick the right 1 or 2 to gain a little bit of traction in my workflow, or planning my next family holiday, whatever it is. But how have you been able to leverage that in the user experience and just that overall coaching workflow?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we're really excited about with AI that I think you'll see start to really roll into hockey here over the next year or so. I think bespoke level coaching at the youth level, and or at least advice. And so to give you context here, we actually started this on our soccer platform. And one of the things that we noticed with youth sports is that the coach is almost never a full-time coach, right? They've got a job in the community, right? They're doing something else, and then they coach for the love of the game, or they want to impact the kids that maybe their kids on the team, or maybe they just want to impact a group of youth. And so they don't have 100 hours. They're not a professional coach, right? They can't go through every moment in a game and give this incredible level of detail. When you're talking about hockey, you got 20 plus kids out there. Soccer, the same thing. You got 18 kids on the field over the course of the game. You don't have, even if you spend 20 minutes per kid, that's a lot of time. And I'm providing this like detailed coaching. But we can actually take all the data we produce on Hudl and start to say, like, hey, based on all the stuff we've seen and the coaching advice we have, within seconds of that data hitting Hudl, say, like, boom, here's bespoke coaching for you as an athlete. So here's a game summary,
No way.
the whole game played. And here, you as an athlete, here's 3 things you did well, 3 things that you should improve on in the next game. And so we've rolled this out in beta for our soccer teams over this last fall. And as you can imagine, the feedback has been like incredibly positive, because they're
how soon is it? Like when the game's over, like how soon is the player getting access to this?
As soon as the data hits the system. So like if there's data that comes in an hour later or so, then like basically seconds after that, they have access to this information. So think about this as like the next morning, you could wake up and have, this kind of coaching information available to you. And which is incredible for athletes, because now, these club teams, you got a 14-year-old out there who just wants to get better, right? They don't, maybe they're never going to go play pro, but maybe they want to make their high school varsity team, or they just want to enjoy it, but their coach doesn't have time to give them all this bespoke coaching. But suddenly you get this like, hey, you were a little sloppy with your passes, like work on improving your pass completion rate. You might know that, but you might not. You might have come off the ice and thought like, I had a great game. And you're like, well, actually, your pass completion percentage was 32%. So let's work on improving that, because that is going to be the difference between you and staying on the ice longer or helping your team win. And giving that level of detail, bespoke coaching, that's the stuff that was really only reserved for professional organizations. We are bringing that down. And I think that is, AI is going to be this like really incredible unlock for these kind of things, where we know what elite coaching looks like. I think, we have NHL teams on our platform. We have great users like you and tons of coaches that are already on our platform coaching with it. So how can we harness that information and say, here's how you support players? We'll work with our hockey users to bring that to life, but being like really excited about what this data is going to mean for giving that level of coaching and detail, and we're excited to bring that to everybody. And then I'll give you one more answer on this, a faster, tighter one on volleyball. This last year, we rolled out our first end-to-end completely AI-driven volleyball tagging platform. Now, there's a human in the loop that comes in at the back end, but for volleyball, and now what's cool about it is we can start to unlock new pieces of information that before were cost prohibitive to unlock. So if you track volleyball at all, and we have great volleyball people on our team that could speak to this in way more detail, but think about a set trajectory. So you want your setter to hit the ball at a perfect trajectory at the right speed to a specific spot, so that the hitter can come in and hit the ball, right? If they hit it too low, if they set it too low, you're hitting it into the net. If they set it too high, maybe the person is leaning back too far, you don't get the kill. Being able to track a trajectory of a ball by a person, that is really time consuming and cost prohibitive. But being able to do that with AI is just unlocked immediately. So now suddenly we can have, through Hudl on Ball Time for volleyball, these set trajectories and set locations to be able to coach athletes to say, hey, this is, your sets weren't in the right spot. Like they were, your trajectory was just too flat. And that's why we weren't getting the same kills that we need. And that kind of coaching, it just, again, was reserved for the most elite levels with professional coaches who had time. And we can bring that all the way down to, 5-year-old volleyball. And so being able to like scale these kind of pieces of information for people, I'm just really excited about what we're going to be able to do with our platform with the video and data to unlock that next level of coaching for youth sports.
I'm just curious. I'm assuming that, when these insights are being delivered to the players, that, it's not just advice, it's linked to video. And so, I just think for my own sort of coaching journey, like the benefit of like, so often players are like, you're like, hey, Matt, you turned the puck over there. It's like, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, now we got to have this like debate about it. But now for a player just to see that in real time, that, hey, like I did, and they can kind of digest that versus being in a team environment and you're breaking them, you're singling them out in a video presentation, that's just a huge step forward. You talk about the cost. So, I won't mention the particular company, but years ago, so right around the time when you guys were getting rolling, I coached in the BCHL, and we were really, we had the benefit, and like at that time, like we're talking like this was a massive advantage that we had one of the sort of contemporary video editing software platforms that was used by every NHL team at the time, every NHL team. And one of the founders of that was one of our owners. So we got this, and I can remember like, we had to come in early before training camp to get educated on how to use this thing. Like they might as well have said, we're going to teach you how to fly a shuttle to the moon. And so we learned that, but once you figured it out, you're like, holy cow, like we're just, it was so obvious to us early on how further ahead we were than everybody else. But the problem was that like the price tag, if it wasn't gifted to us, was, I believe at the time, was upwards of $30,000 a year. Like it just wasn't going to be accessible at the youth levels. I think where Hudl again, just looking from hockey, is that they took a lot of these tools and functionality. Not only did they make it accessible, but they made it affordable to grassroots teams and programs. Like as you guys were building the company, like I could just see, I guess, how easily one of your advisors or somebody on, around the board table says, "Hey, you know what? Like we've got an advantage here. Like let's price it way up here
Sure.
because people are going to want to win, and there'll be some parent on the team that'll stroke the check to give their team or their kid an edge." How did you think about making sure that, hey, like it's really important that everybody wants an edge, but we want to make sure that everybody has that edge and it's accessible to everybody?
Yeah, I think the way you articulated it is pretty much there. We looked at the youth sports ecosystem, and I think one of the things that we were all passionate about is how much luck really just came into your circumstance, right? So going back to even some of the conversation we had on recruiting, did you have the right coach to coach you up? Did you end up at the right tournament and showcase? When that coach showed up to watch your game or your match or your baseball, did you actually get a hit in the game, or did somebody hit the ball to you? And so there was so much luck that came into athletes making it to the next level. And it's not to say that there weren't a lot of deserving athletes that made it. I think it's the other side. It's like there are a lot of people who missed the opportunity to take it to the next level, to even just learn from sports or get the value of teamwork or dedication, or just learning how to drive yourself to get better every day because they washed out at some point because they didn't get that opportunity. And so we were really passionate about how can we help every athlete get the shot they deserve, right? Like that was like we still talk about this all the time at Hudl, right? It's the mission, like give every athlete a shot they deserve. And if you have that mindset, it forces you to think about things differently. How can I build something that scales at the youth level? It doesn't mean we don't, we have elite products that have, really high touch components that are expensive because they are cost prohibitive right now to bring it down to me. But we look at that as, what can we learn from here, and how can we build the technology to scale that and drive that? And with that mission underneath us, that became really important, right? It's like, okay, we need to build products that are affordable inside of a youth sports budget, right? That it isn't just you were lucky and had a rich parent who would come in and buy it, or you were lucky because the owner of the club happened to also own something else, right? And it's not to take anything away from those people who took the advantage of that situation, but it's much more about how can we make this accessible to everyone to hit every athlete. And that mindset really is permeated through everything we do, still today.
Well, you know what? I think we were mentioning before we hit record. You got a son who's a soccer player, aspiring soccer player, and 16 years old. And I think that one thing that every coach hopes is that when their players go back to their dorm or go back home, that they're investing time in getting better. And that might mean shooting free throws in the driveway. That might mean getting mom to be a goalie in the basement to work on your deeks. But you've also provided tools where players can invest a lot of time in analyzing their own game from a usability factor. And I think part of this is, and I've run into some of these conversations where parents are like, I want my kid to get better at sports. One of the reasons I put them in sports is so they're not on their phone or on a tablet. And so, how have you sort of I think just balanced that and made it really a utility for young athletes to invest in their own game and have some agency, but at the same time, I guess maybe balanced or those concerns that a parent might have that says, hey, like we want our kid outside, improving at their craft.
Yeah, I think I laugh because it's one of the jokes we often run into is that, right? It's like, hey, great,
Yeah.
sports is all about not being on your device, and you guys make great tech to put them right on the device. But the reality is, I think from a coach perspective, and the way I talk about it with my son often is, it's a very rare that you're going to find a youth athlete that wants to go watch an entire match, right? Or even just all their time on the ice. Like give them 5 clips to watch or 7 clips.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here's the things you need to watch, whether it's your upcoming opponent or whether it's these things that I want you to improve on or skill sets that like, hey, let's talk about this opportunity. Make it digestible and look, give them 3 minutes of film or 5 minutes of film. That can be way more powerful than saying like, hey, here's a game. Go watch these 2 games and tell me what you see. I'm not saying that that's not part of a journey, maybe as you become older, but especially at youth athletes, like give them bite-sized chunks that they can consume and then say like, hey, here's the skills I want you to work on. Now's a great time for you to go out and practice it, right? Like, and drive and use the tool to encourage that, right? Like, hey, if you're missing your free throws and it's because you're tired in a game, and when you get tired, your elbow cheats out to the side, why don't you go outside and run 10 sprints up and down the street and then come back and shoot free throws, and let's practice while you're tired. Like, use the video to drive home that the lesson you're trying to teach somebody to coach. And I'm saying things that are probably really obvious to coaches, but that's really the story we tell people. It's like, Hudl should be that utility that helps you learn to be better, right? It helps you get noticed, make your highlights. But if we can help a lot of those processes, it shouldn't be that you need to be in Hudl 7 hours every day. Like, I just don't. If you're a high-end coach or analyst, for sure, but if you're an athlete, you need to be in there consuming the content that helps you get better, and then get out and go back out and practice or go into recovery and do that kind of stuff. And I think that's where Hudl can fill a lot of those needs. At the same time, I will tell you, if you're in bed at night, pull up Hudl and watch 10 minutes of film instead of scrolling TikTok, right? Like, that's
Totally, yeah.
And I think that's like,
not all content's created equal. Yeah.
Okay, like, if you've got 10 minutes to kill in the car, like, maybe pull up the game and just watch the second half of a game that was really challenging for you. Like, what did you learn from watching the video that maybe you didn't learn in the moment? That's kind of where Hudl can actually fill a gap and be, I'm not going to say educational, but at least it drives that, like, their brain to think about things in a different way that then encourages them to get back out, field, pitch, and court.
Well, just like, just real time. So we had our leadership team got together this week, and our head of content, Derek, his son's a basketball player, and he got called up to the senior team for provincials. And he was able to go in on the bus ride home and get caught up in who they were going to be playing, the plays, etc. Like, it took an experience that would have been try to be digestible on the fly with a whiteboard to just And again, the kid gets the agency and can dive in themselves. Again, we've touched on the, not necessarily the growth, but like just the how integrated Hudl is in football. We know that it is kind of the go-to tool in volleyball and so many other sports, but specifically in hockey. Where does Hudl sit in hockey? Like, maybe just at the professional level in the NHL. Like, is this a tool that's being used at all in all leagues and around the world?
Yeah, I was dropping the stats on you earlier before we started, but if you think about just InStat, we've got 29 of the 32 NHL teams using us, and it is one of the biggest platforms in the world for hockey, right? And in terms of bringing content together, and part of that is just access to content. Everyone wants to be. It's so much more efficient if you're all in one central spot, right? It's better for scouting and recruiting, but having all of that content, knowing I'm going to go to this place and it will all be there, that's really valuable. You think about those network effects to an extent, like YouTube is that for all of us, right? If you just need to find an internet video, you go to YouTube and you search for it, right?
Fix the dishwasher. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think that concept really holds true for hockey, and that's why you see this growth. But even into the coaching tools, we've grown to 19 NHL teams are using Hudl Sports Code and Hudl's tools. And the Hudl.com, that's the same tool youth hockey teams use, right? So we don't have like a special NHL version. It's the hockey version. It connects and brings all their video and data together, right? So whether they're pulling that in from InStat or they're tagging it on their own in our sports code tool, that's really an elite live review tool, or into the Hudl platform, it's the same tool set, and we're continuing to grow and see at all levels more and more growth in hockey, and it's a big growth sport for us and a big focus for us at Hudl.
And fair to say that again, there's the video aspect, there's the utility that it provides players, but the other part is the data aspect. That not only do you guys mine a lot of data, but you're able to display that and showcase that to your users in real time, whether that's power play percentage, face-off percentage, and then that's something that's accessible. Versus, when I grew up, I don't say this out loud too often. I was a goalie, and one of the downsides of being a goalie is when you're not playing, the coach hands you a clipboard, at least, back in my day, and you had to keep track of stats. And, that's clear to easy. That's not what you signed up for. But now that, that's really at everybody's fingertips in terms of how they can, make decisions on the fly, but also use that as, relevant information and empowering their team.
Hey, well, first of all, don't knock being a goalie. I was, I know you're not, but I was a goalie in our championship broomball winning team here.
Yeah, I've got the pictures on my desktop, buddy. I know all about this. We're going to get to that.
Oh man. Well, hey, that's part of it, but yeah, it's to your actual point, it's I think taking things from what was written down stats, pen and paper, somebody trying to keep track of it live, to really connecting it to live data, us being able to produce data and help teams access and utilize that, especially when it's connected to video, right? To your point, we've made multiple times here. It's when you have that and you can actually say like, hey, like let's actually dig in on these 6 things and like really coach on that and filter right to those moments from the data and then use the video to coach. It becomes really powerful.
100%, 100%. Okay, let's talk some broomball. So I get sent this picture of you, and it wasn't just like Matt is the goalie. Like, just to be clear, Matt was believe the championship goalie on the winning team of, I'm assuming, like a Hudl broomball tournament. Just thought, like, how did you guys land on, like, what's the origin of broomball?
Broomball, I can't claim to know the.
How did you guys pick broomball? How come it wasn't bocce?
Well, we play a bunch of different sports. There's a golf tournament and there's a sand volleyball tournament, but broomball is my favorite. And we love broomball in college. It's, hockey is big around Nebraska. It's not as big as it is up north, obviously, but the Stars are huge here in Lincoln, and our team loves that stuff. But one of my favorite things in college was going to play broomball. So, as we grew Hudl, we started the Hudl broomball tournament and tried to roll it out and say, hey, how can we do this, without people getting too injured and having a lot of fun? So with the broomball tournament, we brought it back a few years ago, and I was, I'm an older guy, so I was like, hey, I'll be the goalie. I'm just fine, and happy to dive in there. And I was lucky enough to have a really good team that made me look good.
Well, just maybe to wrap up here, and I've never quite gotten to the bottom of this, but just in terms of sort of like team building. So I mentioned to you before we record that you guys had a partnership summit several years ago, and we got the invite. And I remember opening up the email, and we're like, "Oh my god, like this is so cool! Can't wait to get down there." And then you check your calendar, and I was like, "Shit, like I got to be in Minnesota for a Minnesota hockey event." And so I ended up sending our CEO Matt and one of my partners, Trent, down to the event. Of course, I was like, there was a football game involved. Like it was awesome and super jealous. And so I'm down in, by the way, and Minnesota was lots of fun too. But I get texted this picture, and I open up my phone, and it's, I'm expecting to see like the tailgating or some kind of scene, and it's a picture of Nerf guns. On the wall, and I'm like, Nerf. I'm like, what am I looking at? They're like, this is like, I think it was like, is it the entrance to your HQ in Lincoln? It was just a wall of Nerf guns, and I said, like, what's this about? And they're like, well apparently, like, occasionally like Nerf gun fights break out, and and at the time it was a little puzzling. As we've gotten to know your team, not that you guys put out Nerf gun fight vibes, but definitely like there's a teamwork, there's a sense of fun that goes along. So maybe just as we close, can you give us the background on the Nerf guns?
Yeah, one of those fun things that you do when you're small and young is we all used to bring Nerf guns into the office and randomly shoot at each other, especially if somebody's on a phone call. You saw them calling home to their girlfriend or their significant other, and you sneak around a corner and shoot them. As we got a little more mature, I think that if you have kids, you'll appreciate what I'm about to say, or people with kids with Nerf guns, the darts everywhere, right? And it all sounds good, but they're all over the house, and we're like, okay, like we can't have these things in the same way all over the office. So now we have a wall. It's up in our cafeteria on our top floor. Kind of maybe a reminder of the good old days of the Nerf guns, but. Every so often we'll have a sanctioned Nerf gun fight where they bring in all the darts and they're all over, and you have 4 floors of just free terror of Nerf guns, and it's a lot of fun. You walk around for the next few days picking up darts and bullets everywhere, but it's all good, and it's just one of those good fun things that you have, just kind of part of the Hudl lore that's still here today.
Oh man, well, keep your head on a swivel while you're out there. Hey Matt, one of the things that we're really proud of is that coaches want to win, but I think by and large, what they want to do more than anything is they want to have a real big impact on their players, not just on a competitive landscape, but also just have an impact on the rest of their lives. We feel really fortunate that we get to play a small part in empowering them to be better teachers and leaders, and really lucky that we get to work with you guys in kind of being aligned on that same mission. So thanks for all that you do on behalf of all the hockey coaches in our community, and thanks for spending time with us today.
Hey, likewise. Thank you so much for all you do for the community and for let us be a part of the journey and doing it together. I love that you got the hat on. I think we're in this together, right? So let's just keep improving hockey, and thanks for all you do, and excited to be here.